So that's it, guys. Nadal is done. He played his last match. Spain is out of the Davis Cup. For you that don't know by now, I am a big Rafa fan. And it's been an emotional day. I am sad, but it's been a sad year. I remember towards the end of last year, I was so excited about the 2024 season. I made a video titled 2024 is going to be epic. I was so looking forward to Rafa coming back, and he did come back in Brisbane, and he was playing well actually, and he got hurt. Then he was going to play in Indian Wells. He played Netflix Slam. I was excited again. Then he pulls out of Indian Wells, doesn't play Monte Carlo, then plays for sure his worst clay court season that he's ever played. Draws Zverev in the first round of the French, draws Djokovic in the second round of the Olympics at Roland Garros, and announces that he's going to finish his career after the Davis Cup in Spain. And now he loses his last match in Davis Cup, and Spain is out in the quarterfinals of the Davis Cup. So it's been a tough year, but I'm going to go back to a conversation that Uncle Tony had with Rafa a while back. And Tony was telling Rafa a story about a former champion that had regrets towards the end of his career. And it wasn't for the fact that he didn't win more titles, but more for the fact that he didn't feel like he gave it his all. And that was Tony's worry regarding Rafa. And Rafa told him, "Don't worry, Tony. When it's time for me to hang up the racket, I'm not going to have any regrets." So, with that in mind, while it is an emotional day for all of us who have supported Rafa throughout all these years, it is so comforting to know that there are no regrets regarding Rafa. He did really give it his all on the court until his body wouldn't let him play anymore. There's absolutely nothing else he could have done. Tony revealed that Nadal has been playing and practicing with painkillers since 2005. So Rafa went to the absolute physical limit regarding his tennis. So this morning before Nadal's match, I made a community post and listed 7 reasons why I became a Nadal super fan in 2005. And some of these things I already talked about in my Rafa tribute when he first announced his retirement. But I want to quickly go over some of these points because I do think they are interesting and they relate to his last match versus Botic van den Zandschulp. So one of the reasons why I became a Nadal fan was his dominance. And in 2005, Nadal went on an absolute rampage. You can listen to that Rafa tribute video where I list some of his results from that year. But what happens with some players, which is very understandable, is that when they win a huge title, there is a satisfaction for that player for having achieved a lifelong goal. And naturally, for some players, there is a letdown in the following weeks, months, sometimes years. Some players are unfortunately never capable of replicating a great result. But something that I've always noticed with Nadal after he won big titles is that, yes, he was happy to win, sometimes crying, throwing himself on the ground. But as the trophy ceremony was nearing the end, I could see Nadal's game face reappear. And I interpreted this as him processing these wins as fast as he was processing losses. I found this very comforting because I knew that Rafa was hungry for more titles. And as a fan, I wanted to see him win as many big titles as possible. Another thing that some people found irritating, again, I found it very comforting, and these were Nadal's superstitions. I'm a very superstitious person. My dad was very superstitious. For example, he wouldn't get out of his car if the clock had the number 13 on it. He was so afraid of the number 13. And I also had many superstitions generally, but also on the tennis court. And when I saw Rafa's superstitions, not only were they entertaining to me, but I could relate to them. Whether it was arranging the water bottles, whether it was the pre match rituals, the in match rituals. Again, this for me was a comforting and relatable thing to watch. Another reason why I liked Nadal was his sportsmanship and his humility. So you guys probably know that Rafa, throughout his whole career, never threw his racket. And that is just a great example for young players. You have to respect the game of tennis. And if you're throwing your racket, that shows a disrespect towards the game of tennis. Rafa was gracious in defeat and gracious in his victories. Yes, he was fist pumping a lot. He was even doing the lawnmower. I pulled out the lawnmower a couple times today during this match, and especially during the doubles, which I'll get to later. But I never had the idea that Nadal's celebrations were disrespectful towards the opponent. Nadal respected the players that came before him and after him. But something that I found funny, and it just showed Nadal's humility, was the respect he would give opponents that had absolutely no business beating him. So, for example, during his prime on clay, let's say he played in the first round of the French Open or some other big clay court tournament against a player ranked 70 or 80, where there was absolutely no chance that this guy would win more than 2, 3 games in a set against Nadal. Nadal would talk as if he was playing in the final of a tournament and he had to play his best tennis to win this match. He showed ultimate respect for every opponent that he faced. Another reason why I like Rafa was his resilience. So, with Nadal's physical style, there were many naysayers, especially early on, that predicted that Nadal was going to get injured a lot and that he wouldn't last very long. And they were absolutely right that Nadal would get injured a lot, but they were absolutely wrong that Nadal would not last. Nadal lasted longer than any of us could have ever imagined. In fact, Nadal was in the top 10 of the ATP rankings from April 2005 to March 2023. Let that sink in. That's 912 weeks in the top 10. That is a record. Another reason why I like Rafa is the impact on tennis that he has had. Go to your local club and take a look how many people are wearing a Rafa hat, a Rafa headband, wristband, or Rafa shirt, or maybe you see somebody playing with a Rafa racket. He has brought so many people to the game of tennis, but there's more. His exemplary conduct on the court and off the court has set a positive example for so many youngsters coming up. Nadal's rivalries with Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic have been some of the most exciting, some of the most entertaining matches in tennis history. I cannot imagine the amount of people that have been brought into the game of tennis because of those matches. Another reason why I could relate to Rafa was his tight knit family. And I come from the country of Croatia where having a tight knit family is very common. For example, kids often live with their parents into their adulthood, which is something that is not common in the West. And I always had this impression that Nadal's family was very tight knit. Nadal's dad, mom, and his sister traveled to most of the tournaments, and Nadal's dad hired Uncle Tony to be Rafa's coach from a very young age. And hiring Uncle Tony turned out to be a genius decision by Nadal's dad, because I regard Uncle Tony as one of the greatest coaches in tennis history. And Uncle Tony said that he didn't shape Nadal's technique as much as he helped shape Nadal's character. Now, let me just give you a few examples, and these examples are legendary. So when Uncle Tony and Rafa would practice, and if there happened to be a shady side and a sunny side on the court, and you know there's a lot of sunshine on Mallorca, Uncle Tony would always put little Rafa in the sun. And I couldn't tell you how many kids I see playing in the shade while the coach is grilling in the sun here in Florida, and it's just simply wrong. So why would it be wrong to put the coach in the sun? Isn't the coach being paid after all? Where that's where Nadal's dad was a genius, because Uncle Tony somehow got paid indirectly through Nadal's dad's business. So because of this arrangement and the fact that he was a family member, Uncle Tony could be more strict with Nadal. And the reason why you want to put a kid in the sun is because when you play a match, you don't have the choice to play in the shade. You're going to have to look up into the sun. You're going to have to be grilling out there in the sun, and you're going to have to train for those conditions. Another legendary Uncle Tony story was when Nadal won the 12 and under Spanish championships, and everybody at home was celebrating and embracing Rafa. And Uncle Tony had called the tournament, posing as a reporter, and wanted to know the names of the last 25 champions of the 12 and under national Spanish championships. So Uncle Tony started rattling off these 25 names and asked Rafa, how many of these names that I just read to you have you heard of before? And Rafa said, five. And Uncle Tony said, well, those are exactly your odds. You have a 1 in 5 chance to make it. Another legendary Uncle Tony story was when Nadal won a tournament in South Africa and he came home, and Nadal's godmother had organized a celebratory welcome party. And before Nadal even got there, Uncle Tony ripped the banners off the wall and started arranging practice for the next morning. Now, a lot of people might interpret this as cruel, but I think this is the reason why Nadal wanted more and was so driven to not let those highs get too high and focus on the next tournament right away. This was instilled in him by Uncle Tony in his junior days. And last but not least, another reason why I loved watching Nadal play was the fact that he's the ultimate fighter. And this was on display even today against Botic van den Zandschulp. Nadal, far from his best physically, still put himself in a position to win this match. Don't get it twisted. Nadal was outplayed today. Botic was the better man. Nadal was down a set and 4-1 double break. And for anyone that has played tennis, the feeling when you're down a set in a double break and you're playing horrible and you're probably not feeling well, you're probably in pain. At the same time, your opponent is on absolute fire. The amount of effort it takes at the mental level to give yourself a legitimate chance to come back in the match is easier said than done. The vast majority of players, even elite level ones, will be overcome by this situation, and they're not necessarily going to tank and lose 6-1. They might even hold serve once or twice. But a lot of players will check out of the match mentally, even if this is not perceivable from the outside. But Nadal has this unique ability to still have belief in himself no matter what the score is. If he's down in a Grand Slam 2-0, if he's down in a set 5-love, he truly believes that he has a chance to win if he gives it his all. And look, there are other great fighters in the history of tennis, but no one compares to Nadal. And even today, down a set and 2 breaks, Nadal pumped himself up in that game at 1-4, broke, held serve, and then had love 30 on Botic's serve. Unfortunately, Botic served 4 bombs, was up 5-3. Nadal held again and was trying again to get that break at 5-4, but he couldn't. So even though Nadal is far from his best, he still somehow found a way to make this match tight. And guys, there's nothing more valuable than that. Because let me tell you something. This was Nadal's last match. But let's just say that it wasn't. Let's just say this was 10 years ago. And Nadal would play another tournament a couple of weeks from now, or maybe in the following season. So when you have the memory of the last match being one where you gave yourself a chance to win, and you lost 4-4, compared to a match where you didn't try hard and didn't give yourself a chance to win and lost 4-2, you just mentally let the match slip away. Even though this is a very nuanced difference, you are going to perform a lot better in the next match, even though you lost the previous one, when you put yourself in a position to come back. So, look, guys, even though this year has been tough, I still had an absolute blast watching Nadal. I had an absolute blast watching him today. And some people are complaining that Nadal shouldn't have played singles, he just should have played doubles. I think this was the right call by Ferrer. This might not have been the best decision for the team's success, but this was the best decision for us fans because we wanted to see Rafa play singles one more time. And I feel bad for Alcaraz because he had a chance to win a medal with Nadal at the Olympics. He gave it his all. He had a chance to take Spain into the semifinals or the finals in the Davis Cup and give Nadal a few more matches. He did play well against Greek Sport, especially in the tiebreak and in the second set. And I thought that Alcaraz played really well in the doubles. However, the best player on that doubles court was Wesley Kohlhoff, who's also retiring. Look, it's not an accident that this guy was ranked number one in the world in doubles. Despite Alcaraz being on the court, Kohlhoff was the best player. And doubles players don't get a lot of credit, but doubles players do get showcased at Davis Cup more than at any other competition. And even though the format has been changed, you cannot tell me that you weren't entertained by that doubles match. And even though nobody cares about doubles during the regular season, you see the skill set that Kohlhoff possesses. He was the absolute boss on that court, and Netherlands deserved to win that match. I'm going to finish this video off with some thoughts that I had while I was watching the ceremony that was given to Nadal after the doubles match. To me, the best thing about the game of tennis is that good character is rewarded. Things such as humility, good sportsmanship, hard work, discipline. Players that display these character traits will have more success in the game of tennis compared to players that don't.